Welcome to another episode of Cubica AMF Seeds of Success podcast. Each week here, we plant knowledge, insights, practical tips, and trends so your center can be a striking success. I am one of your hosts, Orly. Welcome to the show. And as always, I have the awesome Dottie. Dottie, how is it going?
Hi, Orly. It's going really well. I'm really excited. We have a very special show. All of our episodes are always really special. But, in today's world where you turn on the news and you hear so much trouble and violence and just really senseless tragedies, anything that we can do as citizens to protect ourselves or our families or our communities is really of the utmost importance. So today we have Chris Scogin as our special guest. Chris is a U.S. Army veteran who holds the safety of his country, his community, and his family close to heart. As a certified black belt, he teaches others how to protect themselves when confronted with danger. In his current role, which focuses on national defense, he's an advocate of situational awareness and how it can mean a difference, literally the difference between life and death. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you all very much. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we want to kick off the show by a really simple question. What is situational awareness?
Yeah, so situational awareness is really your ability to perceive, understand, and then effectively respond to the situation that you're in, right? So it involves comprehending a given circumstance, like what's going on around you, gathering the relevant information, analyzing it, and then making informed decisions about how to successfully address any risks or hazards or events that might occur.
Kind of put things in perspective of us. Why should that matter? Why should we be so keen on our situational awareness?
For sure. It matters because like you said, like we live in an unpredictable world, and you could find yourself in a situation that, presents itself with violence or that represents something that you have to try to get away from. And so, rather than just kind of mindlessly carrying on about our lives, it's important that we understand maintaining a level of situational awareness so that we're prepared to respond to whatever might transpire around us.
And I know me as like a parent, I'm always kind of aware and trying to be aware of what's going on around us. What are some things we should be aware of when we go into public places like restaurants or like the mall?
Yeah, so there's a number of different things, right? Like, well, first and foremost, like our intuition is something that we should listen to. So, like if you go over to, for example, a friend's house and they were just fighting with their spouse, like you can feel that there's a certain and that's something similar that you can see when you're out in public. There are times where you will just feel like there's a tension or like something's a little bit off. And so it's really at that point where you want to start paying a little bit closer attention to who's around. So some specific things, right, that we can look for. People that don't necessarily look like they fit into the situation, right? They're not engaged in whatever activity it is that's going on there. So like if they're at a bowling alley, they're not bowling or waiting for a lane or doing something. They're scanning the crowd. They seem to be like specifically focusing in and looking at people. Maybe they're dressed in a way that's not really consistent with like the environment that they're in. So for example, if it's a really hot day, you would expect to see people in shorts and t-shirts. If the individual is wearing a long coat, for example, or very, very bulky clothing, that would be something that you would want to look for. Facial expressions can be a very effective way to assess, or estimate the emotion of those around you, right? So if they look to be extremely angry, or if there's a level of fear or disgust that you're seeing on their face, those can be things that you would want to be keying into and looking at specifically.
And if you were like a bowling center, sorry, Dottie, if you were in a bowling center, you saw, that angry person just kind of sitting there, is it best to maybe go up and just say, hey, how's it going, to maybe throw them off a little bit? Or is it something to stay away from? Or
Sure. So it's difficult, right? Every situation is different. Every individual is different. And I would have to really assess that situation and that specific person in that moment to figure out what I would want. But one thing that we can consider, right, as we're going through this this loop or this situational awareness kind of progression is the way I think of it is like there's levels of situational awareness, right? Actually, there was an individual, his name was Colonel Jeff Cooper. He's a former Marine. He came up with the Cooper color code, right? So we have white, yellow, orange, and red. In white, you're tuned out, right? You're relaxed, completely unaware of your surroundings. This is really a phase that you would be in only when you're at home, someplace extremely safe, right? Yellow, you're in relaxed awareness, but you're aware of your surroundings. You're actively scanning for threats, and you could respond quickly if needed. Orange gets us into focused awareness, so monitoring a potential threat with a high level of observance. You're in a heightened state of alertness. And then red is when you're actively responding to a threat and to taking action.
And and sometimes it's a matter of just somebody seems extra fidgety, right? And you have to just, as you said, you really have to rely on your gut feeling, right? Something just seems off. So we have to be in tune to those things as well. So it may not, it may not at the very first, it may not seem like it's something very big, but knowing now kind of what we know and some of those red flags, if you will, we do need to be more aware of how that makes us feel. Does this feel out of kilter?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I can't understate the importance of listening to your intuition. Like if something feels wrong, then it probably is. And there can be like reasonable explanations for why someone may be looking angry, for example, at your center. Maybe they had to like wait for a really long time for a lane. And so in that situation, maybe it is appropriate to go up to them and ask them how they're doing and see if there's anything that you can do to improve the situation for them or whatever. But if you're maintaining situational awareness and you see someone come in and from the get-go they have this angry expression on their face, or they're focused in, they're looking around almost like they're plotting or planning something,
Yeah.
then that need to really key into, gather the information, and then report it to the appropriate authorities or in line with whatever the center's emergency action plan is, which I know we can get into here in a little while.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because we need to be sharing that with all of the employees as well. I mean, they're the frontline workers, and a lot of times you can tell when someone walks up to be served at the front counter. You can tell immediately from the way they respond to you. If you give them, that it's 15 minutes for a lane and they overreact, as you said, you can tell a lot from there. But it's important for us as leaders and managers in the business to make sure that our people are equipped and understand what they need to be looking for and understand that certain situations are out of line, and that's a red flag, if you will. So I think that we need to just be very aware and making sure that the staff is also very in tune with what situational awareness is all about.
Definitely. And, communicating with your employees is key so that they understand the importance of maintaining their own level of situational awareness. And then so that they also understand what the plan is and specifically who they need to tell if they see something that seems out of place, be it the security guard or off-duty cop that's there, the manager of the center, or whatever the case is, depending upon that specific plan that center has developed.
Yeah, and I think something like you guys are mentioning is I think that's one thing you need to let your employees know is it's okay to come tell you. It's not like they're confronting the person. If you see something even a little bit wrong, hey, what's the worst is we look and we say, I don't think it's a big deal. Or he comes in all the time, he's fine. But there's nothing wrong with telling you, because there's nothing worse than saying, after somebody does something like,
Yes.
what, I thought that guy was strange, or I thought something was going wrong there, because that's usually what happens in a lot of these situations. You see a story where they're like, oh, you know what? I figured if that was going to be the person to do it, he would have been the one, or she would have been the one, or, I noticed he was acting weird. I probably should have said something, It's one of those,
right. Don't be so quick
to.
That's right. Don't be so quick to dismiss, because, sometimes you can't go back and salvage that situation. So, Chris, in the line of work that we're in, I travel a lot. A lot of my colleagues travel a lot. And, sometimes it's a little unnerving when you've heard of things that have been happening, in the news, and you get on an airplane. So what are some of the things, or what are some tips that you think that we need to be mindful of as we start our travel journeys?
For sure. So I think that it's extremely important anytime you're going to travel, be it domestically or internationally, that you have an understanding of the crime or the situation in that location that you're going to. So internationally, right, I would highly encourage people to go to the State Department website. So they have threat awareness advisories, and they have country reports for anywhere that you could be planning on going. I think that so you should review that prior to going, because that's going to have information about the consulates that are there and what their numbers are. Those are numbers that you should make sure you have in whatever communication device it is that you take with you. You should ensure that your communication device is going to work when you get to wherever you're going.
Yes.
That's super important. And yeah, I mean, you should just make sure that you do your research before you go, so that you understand what geopolitical situations may be occurring in that country that represent a heightened risk or a heightened threat, so that you can avoid those large demonstrations when you go to those places, so that you understand kind of the nature of the crime situation or what to expect. I think it's also really important when you're traveling internationally, whenever you get there, right, that you do your very best to try to blend in, or to lower your profile, right? You don't want to go to a place, make it very apparent that you're an American, that you're affluent, that you have wealth, you're wearing a big, fancy, expensive watch, right? Or you've got the Gucci bags, or whatever the case is. You just want to try to lower your profile to the extent possible, so that you blend in, so that you don't present yourself as a target.
Yes. And Chris, you have 3 school-age children, and I know that you have raised them to be keenly aware of their surroundings, even in a school environment. What are a couple of things that you recommend that parents make sure that their kids are aware of in that situation, or to watch for?
Definitely. Well, so I'll say 3 things, right? I teach my kids about the importance of maintaining that situational awareness and just being cognizant of what is going on around them. If they see something, I tell them to make sure that they tell an adult, right?
Mm-hmm.
However small it seems, if somebody's acting suspicious, go let an adult know, be it the principal, the vice principal, your teacher, the counselor, somebody. Get an adult involved, because these schools have done a very, very good job of working to make sure that they have strong emergency action plans in the event of some type of threat. And then the last thing that I teach them is what to do in the event of, I mean, specifically an active shooter, but more broadly, any other type of threat. And the prevailing, theme right now, or the thing that they tell you is run, hide, fight,
Mm-hmm.
right? So my kids understand. The first thing that you want to do is attempt to escape that threat, right? Get out of there, move away from wherever the threat is, leave your belongings behind. That stuff doesn't matter, right? Just get away, escape that threat area. If you're unable to escape, then you hide. And in doing so, you're locking doors, you're silencing your phone, you're making sure you're out of the shooter or that threat's field of vision, right? You're barricading doors. And then unfortunately, the last step in that is fight. You have to, if there's no other options, you can't run, you can't hide, you have to fight. You have to commit to decisive action to incapacitate that threat, so that you can, survive that situation.
Yeah, I think those are all good things. And it's tough as a parent. When my kids first had went to school, they were, kindergarten, preschool, and I would get these notes, I mean, I grew up in California, and like there was the earthquake drill, getting on the desk. And then one time we got an email, saying, we did some drills today. And I asked my son about it. I said, hey, what kind of drills did you guys do today? And he was at a young age where he didn't quite know what it was, but he's like, well, we had to get under the teacher's desk with her. It's just something that we have to, if we ever have to hide. Or there was that. And one time there was even like, they said, no more light up shoes. So some kids when you're little, those are the cool things, but you
Yeah.
can't use anymore. And I get the reason, but it's kind of sad that they're so innocent, but you just have to be aware, you have to be ready. And like, I don't know, is there ever, I guess, too much? Like, do you not want to scare them at a young age? Like, you know what I mean? Or is it, because I know even with my wife, sometimes I tell her, hey, we got to watch. And she's like, you're scaring me. You're making me feel like something's going to happen. I'm like, well, you always just kind of have to be ready.
Yeah, right. That's a great point. You definitely have to tailor the message based on their age, right? And so I think it's important that we're less specific with the younger kids, but I think that it's important to be a little bit more specific as they start to get older, especially as they start to get up like into high school. Like they need to understand the world that we live in and the reality of the situation. And I would prefer to have them be over prepared and never have to do any of this stuff than to assume that everything was going to be okay all the time, and they just weren't thinking about these things at all.
Right. And, it's not a subject that any of us like to talk about, but the more you make it, an open conversation, the more these drills, and I know there's many parents that don't approve of the drills and stuff that are going on, that it's putting a fear in the children. But for the children, Orly, as you mentioned, they weren't really aware of it. And for them, it was just another routine thing that they're doing to prepare themselves. So it becomes the norm. So if a situation comes up, God forbid, there's a tragedy going on or a shooter that goes into their facility, their anxiety is not going to be as much as if this was their first exposure to anything like this and they didn't know what to do and there was total chaos and no organization. So, as I said, there's a lot of people that just don't, it's a taboo subject, right? They don't like to talk about it. But we have to face reality. It is a part of the society that we are in, the world that we live in today. And talking about it in a controlled environment is much better than putting yourself in a situation and putting your children or your employees or your friends in a situation where that anxiety takes over and could put them in harm's way.
And that's a really good point. So, like, one thing to consider is that, in an emergency situation, people typically don't rise to the occasion. They drop to their lowest level of training. And so that really emphasizes the importance of these drills, of having a plan, of walking through and getting the training. Because, for example, like now the kids know, hey, if there's something going on, my teacher's going to lock the door and we're going to go under the desk. And there's less of that fear and panic, because fear and panic in emergency situation are they can be very, very bad.
So, Chris, I have to take something that you just said, and I have to make a little note of it. This show is called Seeds of Success, and you mentioned that basically, I'm going to kind of summarize it here. That in a situation, especially a high stress situation, it drops to the level of training that they've received, the lowest level of training that they've received. That can also equate just in general. I mean, we are talking about situational awareness today, but there's a message, there's a little nugget of knowledge here that we need to drop, and that is that the same thing goes when you have your staff in a situation and they're not prepared to meet the crowds, and they've got customers coming in and then they start yelling, and then of course then your situational awareness really needs to come out, right? Because you've got angry people.
Sure.
But that just goes to show the value of training and being prepared and making sure that you're equipping your workers, your family members, your loved ones with what they need to be safe and to be successful in the case of a work environment. So,
Absolutely.
Well, this has been super helpful. Orly, I don't know about you, but I've definitely picked up a few things that I'm going to be a lot more aware of, especially, with traveling. I'm always very good about watching as the plane is filling with the people going to find their seat. Man, I am scoping them all out. So I'm going to be a little bit more aware of that as we go. But Chris, thank you very much for being a guest on today's show. We know that, that equipping our viewers and our listeners with all these little tips is going to help them be, God forbid, we hope that this situation never comes up where they're going to have to put their situational awareness into action. But it's better to be prepared than to be in a situation where you're not prepared, and it can make a big difference. So thank you very much. We appreciate your time today. And don't be surprised if we call you again for another episode.
That'd be great. Thank y'all as well. I appreciated getting to participate today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Orly, do you have anything else to add?
No, I mean, I was excited for this show, and I feel like I've learned a lot. I've always been, that person that kind of is always looking around. Like I say, sometimes I think I scare my wife, but and sometimes I think she thinks it's because I watch these, when animals attack. So when back in the day when circuses were around, I was ready. If this elephant comes in a crowd, like I'm going out this way. So I'm always I'm always ready for each situation. So this is kind of cool to learn a little bit more today from a professional. So yeah,
that's again. Right. And since we're talking about situational awareness, one of the things that I've learned is when you get in a situation, a closed situation, look for your out. So I have learned that. So I will continue to learn as we go, because I, for one, know that it can make a big difference. So thanks, listeners, for joining us today. We look forward for you to tune in next week for another episode of Seeds of Success. That's a tongue twister, Orly. We need to do something about that. As we equip you with more practical tips, ideas, and trends that'll help your center be more successful and you be a better business operator. So until next time, keep making bowling amazing and your bottom line grow.